5-year-old Daniel Miller was an architect of imaginary realms. His current dominion was the verdant expanse of his family's front yard, a familiar landscape that, under the enchanting spell of his vivid imagination, underwent daily transformations. One moment it was a dense, unexplored jungle alive with unseen creatures. The next, the uncharted, cratered surface of a faraway planet. On this particular sun-kissed afternoon, as a soft breeze rustled the leaves of the tall maple tree standing sentinel by the sidewalk, Daniel was an intrepid explorer. His bright red plastic shovel served as his indispensable excavation tool, and a carefully gathered collection of smooth, gray stones were his precious, otherworldly artifacts. He hummed a quiet tune, a self-composed anthem of grand adventure, his blonde curls, the color of summer hay, growing slightly damp on his forehead under the warm California sun. His blue eyes, wide with the earnest intensity of his play, meticulously scanned the terrain for his next significant discovery. He was utterly oblivious to anything beyond the self-drawn perimeter of his make-believe world, lost in that simple, profound joy that only a child deeply immersed in imaginative play can truly experience. Inside the Millers' charming two-story home, a house painted a cheerful buttercup yellow with crisp white trim, Daniel's mother, Emily, was in the kitchen. The comforting aroma of cinnamon and apples, the signature scent of a freshly baked pie, drifted through the open window, mingling pleasantly with the smell of newly cut grass from a neighbor's recent yard work. Emily, a kind woman with a warm, ready smile and eyes that mirrored her son's bright blue, paused in her task of wiping down the cool granite countertop. She glanced through the kitchen window, which afforded a perfect, unobstructed view of the front yard. A soft smile touched her lips as she watched Daniel. His animated gestures, the endearing way he'd occasionally murmur to himself, narrating his ongoing adventures, filled her with a quiet, profound happiness. He was a good boy, imaginative and inherently gentle, perhaps sometimes a little too trusting for his own good. She mused with that familiar maternal pang of protectiveness. She cherished these fleeting moments, these precious glimpses into his innocent, untroubled world. The rhythmic, low hum of the refrigerator provided a gentle counterpoint to the distant chirp of sparrows and the occasional passing car. It was the very picture of suburban tranquility, a snapshot of peaceful, everyday life. Not far from where Daniel played, nestled in a patch of warm sunlight on the porch, lay Oliver, the Miller family's 4-year-old tabby cat. Oliver was, by all appearances, a creature of habit and comfort. With his sleek coat of gray and black stripes, a distinctive white bib and paws, and intelligent emerald green eyes, he often seemed to be the very embodiment of feline indifference. Most of his day was dedicated to strategic naps, meticulously chosen for optimal sun exposure or proximity to a gentle draft, depending on the season. He would observe the world from a sleepy, half-lidded gaze, his tail offering an occasional languid flick, a subtle suggestion that he was, in fact, aware of far more than he ever let on. He tolerated Daniel's sometimes clumsy displays of affection with a stoic, almost regal patience, occasionally rewarding the boy with a deep, rumbling purr or a brief, soft head nuzzle before gracefully extricating himself to find a quieter, more dignified spot. To any casual observer, Oliver was simply a cat, a pleasant but largely passive member of the Miller household. Emily often joked that Oliver considered them his personal staff, employed to provide food, warm laps, and efficient door-opening services. But beneath that cool, composed exterior, there existed a subtle, almost imperceptible bond with the small boy who shared his home. Oliver would often position himself in the same room as Daniel, a silent, furry shadow, watching the boy play with an unblinking stare that hinted at a deeper, more ancient instinct of guardianship, a quiet vigilance that went largely unnoticed. The peaceful, sun-dappled tableau of the afternoon, however, was about to be abruptly shattered. Like a dark cloud suddenly and unexpectedly obscuring the sun, A small group of older boys materialized at the end of the Miller's driveway. There were 3 of them, swaggering with the unearned confidence of youth just beginning to test its boundaries. The one in the lead, a lanky boy of about 9 named Mark, had already cultivated a reputation in the neighborhood for being something of a troublemaker. His 2 companions, slightly younger and clearly his followers, flanked him like eager, if somewhat nervous, deputies. They ambled onto the edge of the meticulously kept lawn, their voices a little too loud, their laughter edged with a note of mockery that Daniel, though deeply engrossed in his game, slowly began to register. Daniel looked up, his precious alien artifacts momentarily forgotten. He clutched his red plastic shovel a little tighter. He didn't know Mark well, but he recognized him from the local park, had seen him teasing other, younger children on previous occasions. A knot of distinct unease began to tighten in his small stomach, a premonition that his peaceful afternoon was under threat. Well, what do we got here? Mark drawled, his eyes fixing on the shiny red shovel in Daniel's hand, his tone dripping with false interest. Playing in the dirt, little kid? His friends snickered, a harsh, grating sound that grated unpleasantly on the otherwise peaceful afternoon ambience. Daniel said nothing, just stared back at them, his lower lip beginning to tremble slightly. He wished his dad was home from work, or that his mom would magically appear at his side. The sense of vulnerability was acute. What's it you're digging for? Baby toys, Mark taunted, taking a deliberate step closer. The other 2 boys fanned out slightly, effectively, if perhaps unintentionally, hemming Daniel in, cutting off any easy escape. The sun, which had felt so warm and friendly just moments before, now seemed to glare down with an unfriendly intensity. The familiar front yard, his kingdom of imagination, suddenly felt exposed, less like a sanctuary and more like a trap. Daniel's heart began to beat faster, a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He wasn't a confrontational child by nature. His first instinct was always to retreat, to avoid trouble whenever possible. That's a nice shovel, Mark continued, his gaze unwavering, his intent becoming clearer. Too nice for a little digger like you. Maybe you should let me have a look. He gestured with a grasping motion, his hand reaching out. No, Daniel managed to say, his voice small but surprisingly firm. It's mine. The shovel had been a birthday present from his grandfather, and it was one of his most treasured possessions. Mark let out a derisive laugh. Did you hear that, guys? He said no. The other boys laughed again, emboldened by their leader's confidence and Daniel's obvious discomfort. One of them, a shorter, stockier boy, nudged Mark's arm encouragingly. Go on, Mark, just take it. Inside, Emily had just finished placing the freshly baked apple pie on a cooling rack near the window. The delicious, comforting scent filled the kitchen, a stark and poignant contrast to the acrid taste of fear that was beginning to brew just outside her window. She happened to glance out again, a casual, routine check on Daniel. Her smile faltered instantly. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't recognize the older boys, but their posture, their uncomfortably close proximity to Daniel, and the way her son was standing, small, defensive, his shoulders hunched, sent an immediate jolt of alarm through her. It was the universal, powerful instinct of a mother sensing her child was in distress, a primal warning that transcended thought. She saw Mark reach out, and though she couldn't hear the words being exchanged, the aggressive intent was chillingly clear. On the porch, Oliver, who had appeared to be in the deepest of slumbers only moments before, was no longer still. His delicate ears, like perfectly tuned radar dishes, swiveled almost imperceptibly towards the sound of the raised, aggressive voices. One emerald eye cracked open, a sliver of green fire glinting in the sunlight. His tail, which had been draped elegantly over his paws, gave a sharp, irritated flick. The low, rumbling purr that had been vibrating softly in his chest ceased abruptly. He didn't move his body, not yet, but every fiber of his small being seemed to hum with a sudden, coiled tension. He could sense the shift in Daniel's emotional state. The boy's rising fear was an almost palpable scent in the air, cutting sharply through the sweet, comforting smell of baked apples. The confrontation in the yard was rapidly escalating. Mark, clearly annoyed by Daniel's quiet but persistent defiance, took another aggressive step forward, his shadow falling ominously over the smaller boy. "I said, let me see it," he demanded, his voice harsher now, laced with impatience. He reached out, fast and clumsy, and grabbed for the red shovel. Daniel instinctively pulled it back, clutching it tightly to his chest. "No, it's mine. Go away," he cried, his voice laced with a desperation that was heartbreaking. The plea in Daniel's voice was unmistakable. He was scared, truly scared now, his playful afternoon shattered. Mark, frustrated by the smaller boy's unexpected resistance in front of his friends, and perhaps a little embarrassed by it, lost his temper. With a sudden, aggressive movement, he shoved Daniel hard in the chest. Daniel, unprepared for the assault and completely off balance, stumbled backward, his feet tangling beneath him. He let out a small, startled cry as he fell, landing with a jarring thud on the soft grass. The precious alien stones, his treasures, scattered around him like fallen stars. The red shovel clattered onto the lawn beside him. Tears welled in his eyes, hot and stinging, born of fear, injustice, and the shock of the fall. From the kitchen window, Emily saw it all. The shove, her son falling. The world seemed to tilt violently on its axis. A fierce, protective anger surged through her, so potent it almost stole her breath. The pie, the quiet afternoon, everything else vanished from her mind. There was only Daniel, her little boy, hurt and scared on the lawn. "Hey!" Her voice was a sharp cry, muffled somewhat by the window pane, but it was unmistakably the sound of a mother roused to fury. She didn't pause, didn't think. She spun away from the window and raced towards the front door, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. The distance from the kitchen to the front door, a path she walked countless times a day, had never seemed so vast, so impossibly long. Each step was an eternity. Visions of what more those boys could do to Daniel flashed through her mind, fueling her desperate, consuming urgency. But someone else was closer. Someone else had also witnessed the intolerable act, the bullying of the small boy. As Daniel hit the ground, as his small, frightened cry pierced the afternoon air, something snapped in Oliver. The lazy, sunbathing house cat vanished in an instant, and in his place was a creature of pure, primal instinct. In a movement almost too swift for the human eye to fully register, Oliver was on his feet, his back arched high, every single hair on his body standing on end, making him appear twice his normal size, a bristling silhouette of feline fury. His tail bushed out like a bottle brush, a clear sign of extreme agitation. A sound ripped from his throat, a sound Daniel and Emily had never heard from him before. Not a meow, not a friendly yowl for food, but a low, guttural, menacing hiss that seemed to come from the very depths of his small being. Before Emily could even wrestle the front door open, her fingers fumbling with the latch in her haste, before the bullies could even begin to process what was happening, Oliver launched himself from the porch. He was a blur of gray and black stripes, a four-legged missile of righteous indignation. He didn't aim for Mark's legs or try to trip him. He went straight for the perceived source of the threat, his eyes blazing with a protective fire that was astonishing to behold. He landed lightly, almost silently, on the grass directly between Daniel and the astonished, suddenly frozen bullies, his body tensed like a coiled spring, his lips curled back to reveal surprisingly sharp, needle-like teeth. The hiss was louder now, more terrifying, laced with a feral snarl that promised retribution. Mark, who had been sneering down at the fallen, tearful Daniel, froze mid-sneer. His jaw literally dropped in disbelief. His two companions, who had been looking smug and expectant just moments before, took an involuntary, stumbling step back, their eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and a dawning, potent fear. They had been prepared for a crying child, perhaps even for an angry mother appearing on the scene. They had not, in their wildest, most arrogant imaginings, been prepared for this. a furious, spitting demon cat. Oliver didn't hesitate for a second. He feinted to the left, then darted with incredible speed to the right, his movements fluid and unbelievably fast for a creature of his size. He swiped with a paw, claws fully extended, not actually making contact, but coming close enough to send an unmistakable and chilling message. The whoosh of air from his near miss was clearly audible in the suddenly silent yard. "What the?" Mark stammered, stumbling backward, his earlier bravado evaporating like mist in a hot sun. This wasn't a playful kitten. This was a miniature tiger, and it clearly, undeniably meant business. Oliver hissed again, a sound that promised pain and defied any further aggression, and took another determined, menacing step forward, his intense gaze locked unwavering on Mark. He was a small creature, barely knee-high to the boy, but in that moment he was a formidable, terrifying force of nature. His eyes, those usually placid green orbs, were now narrowed slits of incandescent fury, glowing with an almost otherworldly light. The other two boys needed no further encouragement. One of them yelped, a high-pitched, undignified sound of pure, unadulterated panic, turned on his heel, and fled, his arms pumping wildly as he sprinted down the driveway and onto the relative safety of the sidewalk, not even daring to look back. The second boy, after a brief moment of petrified indecision, his face pale with shock, quickly followed suit, scrambling away as if the devil himself were on his heels, desperate to escape the wrath of the small, striped avenger. Mark suddenly found himself alone, facing the enraged feline. He looked from the hissing, spitting cat to the rapidly approaching figure of Emily, who had just burst out of the front door, her face a mask of grim determination and maternal fury. The choice was painfully clear. He let out a strange, choked sound, something between a gasp and a squeak of terror, and then he too turned tail and ran, faster than Daniel had ever seen anyone run. He didn't even glance back at the coveted red shovel lying abandoned on the grass. He just wanted to be anywhere but there, away from the terrifying cat. The image of the spitting, clawing, furious feline was seared indelibly into his brain, a lesson learned the hard way. Emily reached the edge of the porch just as the last of the bullies, Mark, disappeared around the corner of the street, his panicked footsteps echoing faintly in the now quiet afternoon. Her breath was coming in ragged gasps, her mind still trying to catch up with the whirlwind of events that had unfolded in mere seconds. She saw Daniel, still on the ground, but now pushing himself up, his tear-streaked face a canvas of utter astonishment and dawning wonder. And there, standing guard over him, was Oliver. The cat's fur was still partially bristled, his tail still impressively puffed, but the terrifying hissing had subsided to a low, rumbling growl, a sound of warning and continued vigilance. He stood firm, his green eyes following the direction of the fleeing boys, ensuring the threat was truly and completely gone. He looked like a tiny, furry sentinel, a pint-sized warrior who had just single-handedly routed an enemy force 3 times his size. Emily rushed to Daniel's side, kneeling beside him on the grass, her hands fluttering over him, checking for injuries, her voice trembling slightly. "Daniel, honey, are you okay? Did they hurt you?" Daniel, still dazed, looked from his mother to the cat, and then back to his mother. The tears were still wet on his cheeks, but a slow, wondering smile was beginning to dawn on his face. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice filled with a profound sense of Oliver. Oliver scared them away. He pointed a slightly shaky finger at the tabby cat, who, as if sensing the danger had definitively passed, finally began to relax. Oliver's fur slowly settled back into its usual sleekness, his tail deflated to its normal elegant proportions, and he let out a little MRRP sound, a soft, almost conversational chirp, as if to say, "All taken care of. Nothing to worry about now." He then walked calmly over to Daniel, rubbed his head affectionately against the boy's leg, and began to purr, a deep, sonorous rumble that vibrated reassuringly through Daniel's small frame. It was, Daniel thought, the most comforting and wonderful sound he had ever heard. Emily pulled Daniel into a tight, fierce hug, burying her face in his soft hair, relief washing over her in a dizzying, almost overwhelming wave. "Oh, Daniel, I was so scared. I saw him push you." She looked at Oliver, who was now calmly grooming a paw, as if engaging in ferocious, heroic battle was all in a day's work, a perfectly normal feline activity. A sense of utter amazement, mixed with profound gratitude, filled her. "Yes, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with emotion she couldn't quite suppress. Oliver did. He was so brave, so incredibly brave. Daniel reached out and gently stroked Oliver's back. The cat arched into his touch, purring even louder, a sound of contentment and mutual affection. "He's my hero," Daniel declared, his earlier fear completely replaced by a shining, unreserved admiration for his feline protector. The red shovel lay forgotten on the grass, its importance momentarily, and perhaps permanently, eclipsed by the astonishing courage of a 4-pound cat. Emily helped Daniel to his feet, her arms securely around his shoulders, offering comfort and support. She picked up the discarded shovel, her eyes still fixed on Oliver, who now sat with an air of quiet, unassuming dignity, watching them with his intelligent green eyes. "You certainly are a hero, Oliver," she murmured, shaking her head in lingering wonder. She had always loved their cat, of course, but this was something new, something profound. This was a depth of loyalty and courage she hadn't known the quiet, unassuming Tabby possessed. He wasn't just a pet, a pleasant companion. He was a guardian, a true member of their family in the deepest sense. They walked back towards the house, Daniel chattering excitedly about Oliver's fierceness, mimicking the hisses and the brave, puffed-up stance, his fall, and the bully's taunts already receding in his memory, overshadowed by the cat's incredible, timely intervention. Emily listened, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride, relief, and enduring amazement. The scent of the apple pie still hung sweetly in the air, but now it mingled with the undeniable, almost palpable aroma of triumph. Later that evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the Willow Creek sky in breathtaking hues of orange, pink, and purple, the Miller household was imbued with a new sense of peace and a subtle but significant shift in its internal dynamics. Daniel, who had usually been content to let Oliver be Oliver, to exist in his own feline world, now sought out the cat's company with a newfound reverence and affection. He shared his dinner with Oliver. A few tiny, surreptitious pieces of chicken slipped under the table when Emily wasn't looking directly, and when it was time for his bedtime story, he insisted that Oliver join him on the bed, nestled among the pillows. Oliver, for his part, seemed to accept his new, elevated status with characteristic feline aplomb and understated grace. He allowed Daniel to cuddle him a little closer than usual, tolerated a few more enthusiastic pats and strokes than he typically permitted, and purred with a richness and depth that seemed to fill the entire room with warmth. He lay curled at the foot of Daniel's bed, a furry, striped guardian, his green eyes occasionally opening to gaze fondly at the boy who was now, unequivocally and forever, his special charge. Emily watched them from the doorway, a soft, tender smile on her face. She had replayed the afternoon's astonishing events in her mind countless times throughout the evening. The chilling fear she had felt for Daniel, the surge of protective anger, and then the sheer, incredulous amazement at Oliver's swift and decisive actions. It was a powerful reminder, she thought, that courage and love could be found in the most unexpected of places, in the most unassuming of creatures. Their ordinary house cat, the one who spent most of his days napping in sunbeams, had shown extraordinary, selfless bravery, transforming a moment of childhood fear and vulnerability into a tale of heroism that Daniel would undoubtedly recount with pride and wonder for years to come. The bullies were never seen near the Miller's yard again. Word, it seemed, had a way of spreading among the neighborhood children, hushed, respectful whispers of small boy protected by a fiercely loyal, slightly terrifying, and undeniably heroic tabby cat. Daniel continued his imaginative adventures in the front yard, his red shovel once again his trusted tool for unearthing imaginary treasures. But now, more often than not, a sleek, striped shadow would be nearby, lounging nonchalantly in a patch of sun, seemingly asleep, but always watchful. Oliver, the hero of Willow Creek, the cat who faced down the ruffians and defended his boy, had cemented his place not just in their home, but deep within their hearts, a furry little legend whose bravery far outweighed his diminutive size. And Daniel knew, with the unwavering certainty of a child who has witnessed a genuine miracle, that he had the best and bravest protector in the whole wide world. The quiet, often unspoken bond between a boy and his cat had been forged anew, strengthened by an afternoon of unexpected peril and even more unexpected valor, proving that sometimes the smallest pause can leave the biggest, most indelible imprints on our lives.